Welcome to Something About Sleep. We hope you'll let our stories guide you to a nice, peaceful slumber as you learn about history and what it was like to be a human in times long since past. Now, I need to get to sleep, and if you're watching this video, chances are you do too. So, without further ado, take it away.
Thank you, sir. On tonight's episode, we'll explore a day in ancient Rome beyond the emperors. So join me here by the fire and rest your weary eyes as I tell you a tale from long, long ago. What did Rome sound like before it became history? Before the marble speeches, before the bronze statues, before the names of emperors were carved into stone and repeated across centuries, there was another Rome. It was not silent. It was not empty. It was a city of footsteps and shutters, of water running in channels, of bread ovens beginning to warm, of sleepy people feeling for their sandals in the dark. It was a city where a potter might know the weight of wet clay better than the name of the man on the throne, where a girl carrying water might understand the mood of her neighbourhood better than the mood of the Senate, where a baker's apprentice waking before sunrise lived inside the empire without ever touching its grandest stories. Tonight, we're not going to follow a general into battle, or stand beside an emperor on a balcony, or hurry from one famous monument to another, as though Rome were only a list of wonders. Instead, we will slow down and spend one ordinary day in the ancient city as carefully as we can. We will move through Rome in the early imperial period, roughly the 1st or 2nd century AD, though the details of daily life varied from decade to decade, from street to street, and from household to household. We will borrow evidence from archaeology, from inscriptions, from ancient writers, and from places like Pompeii, Herculaneum and Ostia, where the remains of streets, houses, shops and tools help us imagine what written history often leaves out. The people we meet will not be one single family, or one exact person whose diary has survived. Most ordinary Romans did not leave long personal records behind. Their lives come to us in fragments, a name scratched on a wall, a cup, a lamp, a doorway worn by hands, a bakery mill, a small household shrine, a wax tablet, a pair of sandals, a receipt, a joke in graffiti, a tombstone remembering a trade. So tonight's journey is a composite, a calm reconstruction, not a claim that every Roman lived in precisely the same way. Rome was too large, too layered, and too unequal for that. It held wealthy houses and rented rooms, freeborn citizens and freed people, migrants and merchants, craftspeople and soldiers on leave, women managing shops, children learning letters, and enslaved people whose labour supported much of the city's comfort and routine. That reality matters. A gentle story should not pretend the ancient world was simpler or kinder than it was. But it also does not need to become grim. We can acknowledge the unequal structure of Roman society with care, while still listening for the quieter human textures of a day, the feeling of cool stone under bare feet, the smoke from a lamp, the smell of wool and olive oil, the sound of a fountain filling jars, the murmur of a street food stall, the scratch of a stylus on wax, the steam of a bath, the household prayers at dusk. If you are listening from bed, from a couch, from a quiet room, from a city apartment, from a long night shift, or from somewhere far away from Rome, you can let the old city come slowly into focus. No need to remember every date. No need to hold every name. Let the details pass like shadows on a wall. Some may stay with you. Others may drift away. And before we step into the dark street, I invite you, gently, to comment where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It is a small modern ritual, but a fitting one for a story about ordinary people in different places, moving through their own hours. If this kind of relaxing history helps you settle, you can also like the video and subscribe for more quiet journeys into the past. No rush, only if it feels right. Now let the present soften at the edges. Imagine that the room around you grows still. Imagine the lights outside dimming. Imagine, far away and long ago, the city of Rome before dawn, not yet grand, not yet awake, simply breathing in the dark. One of the useful ways to listen to the past is to let go of the desire for one perfect answer. Ancient Rome is often presented to us through confident images: a legionary, a senator, a marble temple, a feast, a triumphal procession. Those images have their place, but ordinary life is softer at the edges. It asks for words like perhaps, often, likely, in many cases, and evidence suggests. These words are not weaknesses, they are forms of honesty. They allow the past to remain human instead of becoming a painted backdrop. So as we walk tonight, we will not pretend to know the name of every person who passes us. We will not claim that every street smelled the same or that every household prayed in the same way. We will simply follow patterns that historians and archaeologists have good reason to discuss, and we will let uncertainty create space rather than confusion. A sleep story can be accurate and still gentle. It can admit what is unknown and still feel close. Our route will also avoid treating Rome as if it were one mood. The same street could feel hopeful in the morning, exhausting at noon, sociable in the afternoon, and lonely after dark. The same fountain could be a blessing to one person and a burden to another who must carry its water up several flights of stairs. The same bathhouse could be leisure for a bather and labour for an attendant. This layered way of seeing is important because it keeps the ancient city from becoming either romantic fantasy or grim lecture. It lets Rome be what all cities are: beautiful and difficult, intimate and impersonal, ordinary and astonishing at the same time. Before sunrise, Rome is not the city we usually picture. The monuments are there, of course, but they are withdrawn into shadow. The Capitoline Hill rises like a darker shape against the night. Roof lines overlap, tile against tile, with the higher stories of apartment blocks leaning into the narrow spaces below. A few temple roofs catch the earliest grey light, but their colours are muted. The Tiber moves in the distance, slow and heavy, carrying the memory of docks, warehouses, boats and grain. The streets are uneven, paved in some places with broad stones, rougher in others, and edged by doorways that are still closed. There are places where the city smells of damp stone, places where it smells faintly of smoke, places where animals have passed in the night, and places where yesterday's market has not fully disappeared. But in this hour, before the full heat and press of the day, the city can feel almost tender. The noises are separate enough to notice. A cart creaks somewhere beyond a corner. A chain moves against a wooden door. A dog stirs and settles again. From an upper window comes the low cough of someone waking too early. Rome's nights were shaped partly by practical necessity. In a dense city, moving large goods through crowded streets was difficult. Ancient regulations, changing over time, limited some daytime wheeled traffic, and deliveries often came in the darker hours or at the edge of morning. So while the city sleeps, parts of its working body continue. Grain, amphorae, firewood, building materials, vegetables, wine and oil do not arrive by magic. They come through human planning, animal strength, river transport, dock labour, warehouse accounts, and slow movement along streets that are never quite empty. If you stand near a crossing, you might hear wheels before you see anything. The sound is not dramatic, just ordinary. Wood, iron, stone, the soft command of a driver, the breath of animals. A load is guided through a tight turn. Someone curses under his breath, then laughs quietly so as not to wake a household above. The cart passes, and the city closes behind it. Above the street, people sleep in rented rooms. Rome's housing was varied, but many urban residents lived in multi-storey apartment buildings, often called insulae. Some were sturdier than others. Some had shops on the ground floor and rooms above, with better apartments lower down and poorer, smaller rooms higher up. In the darkness, the building seems almost like a cliff face. Shutters, balconies, beams, patched plaster, and narrow stairways hidden behind doors. The people inside are close to one another, separated by thin walls, different fortunes, different legal statuses, different hopes, but sharing the same hour before dawn. Water is already moving, though much of it is hidden. Rome was famous for aqueducts, but fame can make us imagine every home filled with convenient taps. In reality, private access to running water was uneven and usually tied to wealth, privilege, or special arrangements. Public fountains mattered deeply. They were part of the rhythm of neighbourhood life. Before long, people will gather there with jars and buckets, exchanging words as they wait their turn. For now, the fountain at the end of a street spills into its basin with a patient sound, as though it has been awake all night. There are small points of light. An oil lamp glows behind a shutter. A watchman carries a flame through a passage. Rome had organised night watchmen and fire brigades, especially under the Empire. But no ancient city could be made fully safe or fully orderly. Still, in the hour before morning, the presence of someone moving with purpose can be reassuring. He knows which door belongs to the baker, which shop has a loose latch, which corner collects rainwater, which stairwell is always dark. Not every building is a home. Some are workshops, some hold storage rooms, some are small shrines, some are taverns not yet open, with counters waiting in the dark. Some are spaces where enslaved people have already begun labour while others sleep. A wealthy household may be stirring behind a quiet facade, its servants and enslaved workers preparing fires, water, clothes and food before the family appears. In a poorer room above a shop, a woman wakes by habit and listens, knowing the hour by sound rather than by clock. Ancient Romans divided the day differently from us. Hours of daylight were often counted from sunrise to sunset, meaning that the length of an hour shifted with the season. Modern exactness is not the mood of this morning. Time is in the colour of the sky, in the arrival of carts, in the first voices near the fountain, in the ember coaxed back to life. A shutter opens, then another. The small wooden movement repeats across the street. Someone leans out briefly to see whether dawn has truly come. The air is cool enough to make the body remember night, but the eastern sky has begun to pale. Rome is still half asleep, yet the day is already forming. It gathers itself through water, bread, footsteps, and routine. Let us leave the street for a moment and follow one stairway upward, where a household in a rented room begins its own quiet morning. If we pause a little longer in that grey hour, the city begins to show its geography through sound. Down toward the river, the noises are heavier. Ropes, wood, animals, the low coordination of men who have learned to live together. Higher on the slopes, the first sounds are domestic. A door bar moved aside, a small cough, a vessel set down carefully so it will not wake someone still asleep. The hills of Rome are not only famous names, they are gradients felt in the calves, routes learned through habit, lines between neighbourhoods, views, smells, and social worlds. There are gardens somewhere behind walls, though not for everyone. There are courtyards where the sky can be seen clearly. There are cramped alleys where dawn arrives late because the buildings stand close. There are streets that remember rain, streets that hold dust, streets with drains, steps, thresholds, and places where wheels have marked the stone. A city is never only its plan. It is the body memory of those who pass through it. Before dawn, even social rank can seem briefly blurred, not erased, but softened by darkness. The wealthy house is still the wealthy house. The rented upper room is still the rented upper room. The enslaved worker is still bound to someone else's will. Yet the same cool air touches many faces. The same early light reaches the same rooftops. The same fountain will soon serve different hands. In this thin hour, Rome feels less like a hierarchy drawn in law, and more like a single creature preparing to open its eyes. The darkness also reminds us that ancient lighting was local. There was no general wash of electric light flattening the city into visibility. Night belonged to pockets and pathways. A person carrying a lamp carried a little world with them, and everything outside that world was suggestion. A wall, a threshold, a sleeping animal, a figure turning a corner. To know Rome at night was to know it by memory, not by sight alone. That memory could be practical and almost tender. The third step from the bottom is uneven. The corner near the fountain smells of wet stone. The doorway with the carved lintel means you've gone too far. The bakery wall stays warm longer than the others. A city becomes home when the body can navigate it before the mind has fully awakened. Dawn slowly changes the authority of the eye. Shapes become objects. Objects become places. Places become obligations. The cart is no longer just a creak, but a load of jars. The shadow at the doorway is the neighbour's son. The darker patch near the wall is spilled water. Morning takes the mystery of night and gives it tasks. Animals are part of this hour as well. Mules, donkeys, dogs, birds, perhaps chickens in some courtyards, and the occasional restless horse contribute to the city's living sound. They are not decoration. They carry, pull, guard, scavenge, wake, annoy, and accompany. A donkey knows the route to a delivery almost as well as the driver. A street dog knows which stall drops scraps. Birds know which roof warms first. The city before dawn is therefore not only human, it is shared with creatures whose labour and habits make urban life possible or unavoidable. Their presence keeps Rome from becoming too polished in our imagination. It reminds us that the ancient city was earthy, breathing, and full of bodies. Somewhere a baker has been awake so long that dawn feels late. Somewhere a woman has risen before the rest of her household, so that everyone else's morning can seem easier. Somewhere an enslaved servant begins tasks under orders that are not spoken kindly or cruelly tonight, but simply expected. Somewhere a free labourer hopes there will be work. These lives do not meet yet, but the hour holds them together. The stairwell is narrow, and the steps have learned the shape of many feet. They rise from the street past a shop front, past a landing where someone has left a basket, past a door that opens into darkness, and then higher, where the air is warmer and the sounds of the building are closer. This is the upstairs world of Rome, the world that rarely appears in marble. It is made of rented rooms, shared walls, practical possessions, patched clothing, stored food, and the small negotiations of neighbours who hear one another living. Inside one room, Morning begins slowly. There may be a simple bed or a mattress laid on a frame, perhaps rolled bedding, a stool, a chest, a basket, a cloak, a pair of sandals, a shelf with a cup and small objects, a lamp burned low from the night before. Not much space is wasted because there is not much space to waste. The room is not necessarily destitute, but it is modest. It holds what is useful, what can be carried, what can be mended, what has survived. A person wakes and lies still for a moment, listening. Ancient walls were not private in the modern sense. The building has its own morning language. A child murmurs in another room. Someone on the landing shifts a jar. Below, the shopkeeper's family moves behind the shuttered storefront. Farther down, near the street, there is the dull scrape of wood as a counter is prepared. If a rooster calls somewhere nearby, it is not the charming symbol of a rural morning, but one more thread in a dense urban fabric. The light enters thinly. Upper rooms could receive more air than lower ones, but they could also be exposed to heat, cold, and inconvenience. Lower floors were often more desirable. Climbing higher could mean paying less, though conditions varied. From this height, the street is both near and distant. You can hear everything, but reaching anything requires stairs, careful steps, and the carrying of whatever the day demands. The first act is simple: sitting up, reaching for clothing, tying sandals, folding bedding. Roman dress differed by status, occasion, gender, and region, and not everyone moved through the city in the formal image we associate with statues. Tunics were ordinary garments. Cloaks could be added. The toga, so strongly linked with Roman citizenship and public identity, was cumbersome and not everyday wear for every task. For work, errands, and movement through crowded streets, people wore what allowed them to move, lift, carry, and endure. Nearby, a woman checks a small amount of stored food. Perhaps there is bread from yesterday, olives, cheese, dried fruit, or something left from the evening meal. In many poorer or modest households, cooking arrangements were limited. Some rooms may have had small braziers, but fire in apartment buildings was a practical concern, and many people relied on bakeries, food stalls, taverns, or simple foods that did not require elaborate preparation at home. The Roman city fed many of its people outside the private kitchen. A child wakes reluctantly. Another household is already louder, with someone scolding softly and someone else searching for a missing belt or stylus. The building is full of these tiny dramas, none of them grand enough for official history, yet all of them necessary. A broken sandal strap matters. A missing coin matters. A jar that must be filled matters. A debt remembered in the morning can change the mood of a whole day. The room may be shared by a family, by relatives, by lodgers, or by people whose relationships do not fit neatly into modern categories. Rome was a city of movement. People came from Italy, from the provinces, from ports and villages, voluntarily or by force. Some were citizens, some free non-citizens, some freed people, some enslaved. A person's accent, legal status, trade, patron, birthplace, and family ties could shape how the city treated them. Yet in the practical hush of morning, many of the same needs appear: water, food, work, clothing, rest, news, and human company. It is easy to imagine ancient homes as either luxurious villas or miserable rooms, because extremes leave clearer traces. The truth for many people was somewhere in between, and often changing. A skilled craftsperson might rent above a workshop and live carefully but not hopelessly. A freed woman might help run a shop with discipline and pride. A migrant labourer might share cramped space and send money to relatives elsewhere. An enslaved person might sleep near the place of work with little control over the day ahead. The city held all of these lives at once. On a small shelf, an oil lamp rests beside a few personal things, perhaps a bead, a small figurine, a comb, a needle, a token, a written scrap. Objects were not merely objects, they kept memory. A cup might have been bought after a good season. A cloak might have belonged to a parent. A cheap lamp stamped in a mould might still hold the warm intimacy of evenings spent under its light. Archaeology often finds the ordinary after the extraordinary has vanished. The official names fade, and the small things remain. At last, someone opens the door. The hallway smells of other households. The air carries smoke, wool, human warmth, and the faint promise of baking bread from below. The stairwell is busy now, not crowded enough to be overwhelming, but alive. A neighbour comes down with a jar. Another goes up to fetch a forgotten tool. A child pauses on a step to tie a sandal while an adult waits with visible patience, or perhaps not much patience at all. The day is not yet fully bright, but the building has awakened. The upstairs world pours slowly into the street, one person at a time. The rented room is left behind with its folded bedding, its cooling lamp, and its little shelf of possessions. For now, life moves downward, toward water, errands, food, and the first exchanges of the morning. The stairs themselves deserve attention. They are part of the day before the street is. To descend them with an empty jar is one kind of movement. To climb them with a full jar is another. A young person may run, earning a reprimand. An older person may pause, hand on wall, measuring breath. Someone carrying bread tries not to brush against plaster. Someone with a bundle of cloth lifts it high to avoid dust. Every stairwell in the building has its own etiquette, negotiated without writing. Privacy is thin here, but not absent. People create privacy through lowered voices, turned backs, curtains, timing, and mutual pretending. A neighbour may hear a quarrel and decide not to hear it. A family may wait until another household leaves before discussing money. A child may know which adult cries at night and never mention it. The crowded building forces knowledge, but kindness sometimes appears as silence. The upper room also has seasons. In winter, the cold finds gaps. In summer, heat gathers beneath the roof. Rain changes the smell of timber and plaster. Wind tests shutters. Dust settles differently when roads are dry. Ancient daily life was not only a matter of culture, it was also weather indoors. People arranged possessions according to damp, heat, pests, light, and the need to leave quickly for work. The room was small, but its intelligence was large. Rent itself is an unseen presence in the room. It may not be spoken of every morning, but it shapes the space. The room is not owned in the secure way a wealthy estate might be owned. It is held through payment, arrangement, tolerance, and the landlord's expectations. In a city where demand for space was high, the ability to remain in a familiar room could matter deeply. Home is not only where one sleeps, it is where one knows the noises, the neighbours, the light, and the shortest path to water. The objects in the room show a life prepared for movement and repetition. A basket can carry food, wool, tools, or laundry. A cloak can be bedding, warmth, status, or protection from rain. A chest can hold clothing, documents, savings, memories, and the few things that must not be lost. In modest homes, objects often work hard. They serve more than one purpose because they must. The room is left behind each morning with trust that may not feel like trust. people cannot carry everything. They leave bedding, tools, jars, small precious things hidden or not hidden enough. The closed door becomes a promise made to oneself. When the day is over, I will return here. A small mirror, if the household has one, catches weak morning light. Roman mirrors were often polished metal rather than glass as modern people know it, and their reflections could be softer, darker, less exact. To look into such a mirror in the morning is to see oneself imperfectly, which may be fitting for the past itself. The outline is there, the details shimmer. Grooming can be quick or careful. Hair is tied, combed, pinned, or simply made acceptable for work. A face is washed if water is available. A garment is shaken, straightened, and inspected for stains. Appearance matters because the street is public, and public life notices. Even modest people understand presentation. To be poor does not mean to be careless. Dignity often lives in small acts of order. If there is a window, the view may be mostly another wall, yet even that wall gives information. Light, weather, whether a neighbour is awake, whether smoke is rising, whether laundry has been left out, whether someone has returned late. In dense housing, the view is not scenic, but it is communicative. It tells the resident how the building is beginning its day. At street level, Rome feels different. The air is wider, though the street itself may be narrow. The stones underfoot are cool. Doorways open outward into the day. A shopkeeper lifts or removes a shutter, and the darkness behind it becomes a place of trade. Somewhere a donkey is led carefully past a corner. The city begins not with a grand procession, but with errands. Water comes first for many households. The public fountain is already drawing people. Some carry clay jars, some metal vessels, some buckets or skins. The fountain is not merely infrastructure, it is a meeting point. Here, a person learns whether a neighbour's child is ill, whether a delivery arrived late, whether a patron is receiving clients, whether a bakery has burned a batch, whether a festival preparation will close a street. Information moves with water. It flows from mouth to mouth as surely as the fountain flows from pipe to basin. Rome's aqueducts were among the great achievements of Roman engineering, bringing water across miles through gradients, channels, arches, and settling tanks. But the greatness of the system was experienced differently depending on who you were. A wealthy house might have access to private water under certain conditions. Public baths, fountains, latrines, and basins served the wider population. For the person holding a jar at dawn, the aqueduct is not an abstract monument. It is the cold splash into a vessel, the weight on the hip, the careful walk back through a street where one careless bump can waste the morning's effort. The queue at the fountain has a rhythm. There is courtesy, irritation, gossip, silence. An older woman gives advice no one requested. A boy tries to lift more than he should. A worker with strong hands fills quickly and leaves without lingering. Someone asks about the price of oil. Someone else says the oil is always too expensive and always has been. Such remarks do not change history, but they are history in its most breathable form. From the fountain, errands branch outward. One person must bring water back upstairs. Another needs to buy bread. Someone else carries a message, perhaps written on a small tablet, perhaps memorized. A freedman goes toward the house of a patron for the morning greeting, the salutatio, a social practice in which clients might attend a more powerful person's home, seeking favour, connection, or support. This was not the whole life of Rome, but it was part of the city's social web: obligation, ambition, courtesy, dependence, and performance woven into the morning. The street itself is a record of use. Door thresholds are worn. Walls may bear painted notices, advertisements for games, endorsements, jokes, names, and scratches left by people with idle hands or urgent messages. Not every street was equally decorated or maintained, and much depended on neighbourhood and period. Still, Roman cities were visually busy. The walls spoke in official and unofficial voices. They remembered elections, sales, games, insults, affection and boredom. Passing through these streets, you notice how much life happens at the boundary between private and public. Shops open directly onto the road. Workshops display their labour. Food is cooked near the customer. A barber may work in sight of passers-by. A fuller handling cloth might be known by smell as much as sign. A metalworker's hammer makes a sharper note that carries down the street. A baker's doorway breathes warmth. In ancient Rome, the home did not always hide behind a private front, and work was not always sealed away from view. The city made many tasks visible. The first errands also reveal social difference. A person carrying water for their own household moves differently from an enslaved worker carrying water for someone else's. A child sent to fetch bread has a different urgency from a cook attached to a wealthy home. A shopkeeper buying supplies thinks in quantities and margins, while a labourer counts coins and appetite. Yet they meet at the same corners, avoid the same puddles, hear the same fountain, and look up at the same brightening sky. There are small shrines along the way. Some are official, some local, some attached to crossroads. The lares of the neighbourhood, protective spirits associated with place and community, might receive attention in ways both formal and ordinary. Religion in Rome was not only inside temples, it lived in gestures, calendars, household rituals, crossroads, business openings and brief acknowledgements. A passerby may not stop long. A glance, a touch, a muttered phrase can be enough. The city smells stronger now. Damp stone gives way to bread, oil, smoke, animal hide, wool, wine, and the layered odour of too many lives close together. It would be dishonest to make it purely pleasant, but it would also be wrong to imagine only foulness. Ancient cities had difficult smells and lovely ones mixed together. The nose would learn roots as much as the feet did. Here the baker, there the tannery, here the spice cellar, there the fountain, here a garden wall where leaves hold the cool of the morning. A jar is filled, a coin is found, a message is delivered, a loaf is chosen. The earliest errands end, and the morning becomes busier. The appetite of the city begins to rise. So we follow the smell of grain and heat toward bread, breakfast, and the small counters where Rome begins to feed itself. The fountain has its own social memory. People know who comes early to avoid conversation and who arrives late because lateness is part of their nature. They know which jar belongs to which household, which child can be trusted not to spill, which old man will tell the same story if given the smallest opening. A newcomer learns the order slowly. Stand too close, and someone corrects you. Stand too far away, and your turn disappears. Public water teaches urban manners. Carrying water changes the body. The hand tightens around a handle. The shoulder learns balance. The hip shifts. A person walks differently when the vessel is full. Streets that seem simple on the way down become obstacles on the way back. A loose stone, a passing animal, a neighbour stopping to speak, a child darting too close. Water is heavy, and because it is heavy, it makes clear how much of domestic life rests on repeated effort. First errands also give the city its morning map. The bakery, the fountain, the shrine, the patron's doorway, the schoolroom, the workshop, the market, the latrine, the baths not yet open, the tavern still smelling of last night. Each place pulls certain people at certain hours. By watching movement, you could read the neighbourhood. You could tell who works with their hands, who serves in a household, who hopes to be noticed, who has nowhere urgent to go. Street surfaces change the mood of walking. Broad paving stones give a certain confidence, though they can be slick with rain or worn by wheels. Packed earth or rougher passages slow the step. Stepping stones, drains, curbs, thresholds, and narrow turns require attention. Ancient walking was not the abstract movement of a map. It was a negotiation with material beneath the feet. The first errands are also when people measure one another. Who greets whom? Who avoids eye contact? Who has new sandals? Who looks tired? Who seems to have money today? Who's been absent from the fountain for too long? In a dense neighbourhood, privacy is limited not only by walls but by attention. People notice because noticing is a form of safety and social knowledge. Still, the morning is not all surveillance. It is also companionship. Two people walking in the same direction fall into conversation. A child is handed a small task and takes pride in it. Someone helps lift a jar. Someone points out that a strap is loose before it breaks. In the practical kindnesses of errands, the city becomes livable. Coins pass from hand to hand early in the day. A small bronze coin may buy a little food, pay a fee, settle part of a debt, or make possible the next errand. The face stamped on the coin may belong to an emperor, but the person using it may barely think of imperial image. A coin is weight, value, possibility, and worry. It disappears too quickly. The sound of coins is one of the city's morning sounds, counted on a counter, dropped into a pouch, argued over, tested, refused, accepted. Money makes relationships both easier and sharper. It allows strangers to exchange, but it also exposes shortage. A person with enough coins walks differently from someone who must decide between bread now and oil later. Errands also train children in the city. A child sent to the fountain learns routes, manners, prices, risks, and faces. They learn who speaks gently, who cheats, who helps, who should be avoided, and which wall casts shade on the return. Childhood education is not only letters, it is also the apprenticeship of moving safely through a neighbourhood. Bread is one of the quiet centres of the Roman day. It does not command attention like a temple or an arch, yet it holds the city together. Grain must be grown, taxed, transported, stored, milled, kneaded, baked, sold, carried, broken, and eaten. By the time a loaf reaches a hand in the morning, it has already travelled through a world of labour. In Rome, the grain supply was a matter of enormous importance. The city could not feed itself from its immediate fields alone, especially at the height of its population. Grain arrived from regions across the Mediterranean, including North Africa, Sicily, Egypt at times, and other areas depending on period and policy. Ships brought cargo to ports. River transport and roads carried it onward. Warehouses held it. Mills and bakeries transformed it into food. To ordinary people, this system appeared not as a map of imperial administration, but as the price and availability of bread. A bakery is waking fully now. If you look inside, you might see the equipment that archaeology has made familiar from Pompeii and other Roman sites: mills, ovens, work surfaces, storage areas. In some bakeries, animals turned heavy mills. In others, human labour did the work. The room is warm, dusty with flour, and alive with repeated motions. Grind, mix, knead, shape, bake. The work is physical and skilled. It requires timing, heat judgment, muscle, and memory. The smell is immediate. Warm bread has a power that crosses centuries. It softens the street. It draws people who have coins and people who are counting carefully. Breakfast for many Romans was likely simple. Bread dipped in wine or water, cheese, olives, fruit, perhaps leftovers from the day before. The Latin term ientaculum is often used for the morning meal, though habits varied by class, region and period. Some people ate early because work demanded it. Others might delay. Some had servants to prepare food. Some bought what they could on the street. At a food stall, the morning is practical rather than leisurely. A counter opens. Jars are set into place. A vendor arranges bread, pulses, perhaps cheese, perhaps fruit in season, perhaps something hot depending on the establishment. The Thermopolium, familiar from Pompeian remains, is often described as a kind of ancient hot food shop, where people could buy prepared foods and drinks. We should be cautious with modern comparisons. It was not exactly a cafe, not exactly a restaurant, not exactly fast food in the contemporary sense, but it did serve an urban need. Many people did not have the space, equipment, time, or safety to cook elaborate meals at home. The vendor knows the neighborhood. Regular customers are recognized by face, by debt, by preference, by complaint. One person wants bread and watered wine. Another asks whether the lentils are ready. A third only has enough for something small and tries to make it last. A worker buys quickly and eats while walking. A child is told not to touch the counter. Someone laughs because the vendor has made the same joke every morning for 10 years. Roman food was more varied than the simple stereotype of bread and olives, but ordinary diets were shaped by access and income. Bread, grains, legumes, vegetables, olive oil, wine, cheese, fruit, and fish sauces all had roles, though not equally for everyone. Meat could be present, especially on special occasions or for those who could afford it, but it was not necessarily the daily centre of every meal. Seasonality mattered, local supply mattered, storage mattered, taste mattered too. The Romans enjoyed flavour. Herbs, vinegar, honey, pepper for those with means, garum or other fish-based sauces, and combinations that may seem unfamiliar now, but were part of a living culinary tradition. At the edge of the stall, a man from another part of the empire eats quietly. His accent marks him as not originally from Rome. No one knows whether he came for trade, service, hope, obligation, or because the empire moved people as much as goods. Beside him, a woman with practiced hands purchases food for a household where she works. Her morning is not her own, but she knows the best stall, the fairest measure, and which vendor stretches the wine too thin. Ancient cities often required such knowledge. Survival was partly a matter of knowing where to stand, whom to ask, when to buy, and when to walk away. Nearby, a child carries a small piece of bread and tries not to eat it before reaching home. A dog watches with deep professional interest. The child's eyes shift from the bread to the dog and back again. Nothing important happens. The bread survives. The dog sighs. The morning continues. Food stalls were also places where the social lines of Rome brushed against one another. Respectable moralists among the elite sometimes looked down on taverns and certain public eating places, associating them with lower status or loose behaviour. But moral complaint often tells us as much about elite anxieties as about everyday reality. People needed to eat. They needed warmth, drink, conversation, and a place to pause. The ordinary city did not run on ideals of elite household dining. It ran on counters, vendors, bakeries, markets, and quick exchanges. The smell of bread follows us as we leave the stall. The day has crossed a threshold. People are no longer simply waking. They're beginning to work. Tools are lifted, shop fronts open, accounts are remembered. The quiet appetite of dawn becomes the sound of labour, and we turn toward the artisans, labourers and small businesses that keep Rome alive beneath its imperial surface. A loaf of Roman bread might be round and scored, or shaped according to local habit and bakery practice. Some surviving loaves from the Vesuvian cities, carbonized by disaster and preserved by chance, show divisions that made them easier to break. We do not need to dwell on the disaster to appreciate the evidence. The loaf is a message from a kitchen. People shaped bread to be shared, sold, carried and recognized. At breakfast, conversation may be sparse. Hunger is practical. A worker eats with one hand while holding a tool bundle with the other. A mother gives a child the portion that will cause the least argument. A shopkeeper drinks watered wine and thinks through the day's accounts. Someone dips bread into something savoury and pauses because, for a moment, the taste is better than expected. Such small pleasures rarely enter formal history, yet they may have saved many mornings from feeling entirely hard. The food stall also teaches us about urban time. Cooking at home takes fuel, space, vessels and attention. Buying food outside converts someone else's preparation into your own saved time. That trade is ancient. The stallholder has already risen, already stirred the pot, already judged the heat, already taken the risk that customers will come. When a customer buys a proportion, they are not just buying food, they are buying part of the vendor's morning. Fuel is part of breakfast too, whether visible or not. To bake bread or heat food, someone must gather, buy, store and burn material. Wood, charcoal, and other fuels carry cost and labour. Smoke is the smell of energy being spent. In a city, every warm loaf implies not only grain but fire. The oven is a kind of clock. Those who work near it know when it is ready by heat on skin, by colour, by habit. A poorly timed loaf wastes labour and ingredient. A well-timed loaf earns trust. Customers may not understand every step, but they know when bread is good, and they remember. Reputation in a neighbourhood bakery is built in crusts. For the person eating in the street, breakfast may be brief, but it is still a threshold. Before food, the body is only awake. After food, it can belong to the day. The first bite tells the stomach that work is possible. Breakfast also has a social temperature. Some people eat alone by preference or necessity. Some eat surrounded by customers, neighbours, or co-workers. Some take food back to a room where others are waiting. In a city as dense as Rome, eating did not always mean gathering around a private family table. It could mean standing in a doorway, sitting on a step, leaning near a stall, or sharing a quick bite before work begins. The simplicity of the meal does not make it meaningless. A piece of bread dipped into oil, wine, or a stew can carry comfort far beyond its ingredients. The first food of the day says, "You have crossed from night into labour, and your body has been remembered." A vendor's counter can become a small stage of fairness. Measures are watched, portions are judged. Regular customers remember if yesterday's serving was generous or not. Trust is built by habit and damaged by a single insult. In an ordinary Roman neighbourhood, reputation is not an abstract virtue. It is whether people come back tomorrow. A Roman street in the morning is a long workshop. The city does not hide its making. Doors open, shutters lift, and trades reveal themselves in sound before the eye has time to settle. A hammer tapping metal, a saw moving through wood, wool being handled, clay being shaped, a knife on leather, a broom against a threshold. The small work of Rome begins not as a single chorus, but as overlapping rhythms, each one belonging to a trade, a household, a hand. Many shops were narrow spaces open to the street, with living quarters behind or above, though arrangements varied. The front might hold a counter, tools, display goods, or workbench. The back might store materials. In some places, a family business and domestic life were closely connected. A child could grow up knowing the smell of dye, flour, hot metal, oil, or wet clay as the smell of home. The potter works with clay that remembers the riverbank or quarry. His fingers press, turn, and smooth. Not every vessel is fine art. Most are useful. Storage jars, cups, lamps, bowls, cooking pots, amphorae for transport, tiles, weights, little objects made to be bought cheaply and used daily. A broken pot may seem humble, but broken pottery is one of archaeology's most generous witnesses. It tells of trade, habit, diet, storage and ordinary wear, and a household may leave no poem, but it leaves sherds. Down the street a metalworker's shop is sharper in sound. The work may be repair rather than creation, a hinge, a tool edge, a fitting, a nail, a small household object. Repair is one of the great invisible economies of the past. We often imagine ancient people making new things, but much daily life involved keeping old things usable. A strap mended, a blade sharpened, a pot patched, a tunic darned, a lamp refilled, a basket rewoven. In a world where many goods required intensive labour, maintenance was not a minor task. It was a way of living with limits. The fuller, involved in cleaning and finishing cloth, belongs to a trade that touches both the body and the senses. Clothing absorbs life. It gathers sweat, dust, smoke, oil, and the marks of labour. Fulling could involve soaking, treading, cleaning agents, stretching, brushing, and finishing. It was necessary work, sometimes unpleasant, and often associated with strong smells. Yet the result mattered enormously. A clean or well-finished garment could signal respectability, care, status, readiness for public appearance. Cloth was not background. It was part of how a person entered the world. A barber sets up in a place where passers-by can see. Shaving, trimming hair, removing unwanted hair, grooming nails, and exchanging gossip all belong to the small theatre of daily life. The barber shop is not only about appearance, it is a social listening post. Men may sit and talk while waiting. News is repeated, corrected, exaggerated, softened. A joke moves from one mouth to another. A rumour grows legs. Someone pretends not to care and listens carefully anyway. Not all labour fits neatly into a shop. Porters carry loads. Day labourers look for work. Builders move materials. Street sellers walk routes with baskets. Water carriers, mule drivers, cleaners, cooks, attendants, scribes, teachers, midwives, entertainers, and countless others form the practical city. Rome was not only marble and law. It was a vast arrangement of tasks, some skilled and respected, some badly paid, some coerced, some seasonal, some inherited, some improvised because survival demanded improvisation. Enslaved labour was woven through Roman work in ways that cannot be ignored. Enslaved people might serve in households, workshops, fields, mines, businesses, schools, and administrative roles. Some were highly skilled, some endured brutal conditions, some could be freed and become freed people, though freedom did not erase the past or remove all obligations. In a calm narration, we do not need to dwell on suffering, but we should let the truth remain visible. The ease of some Roman lives depended on the limited freedom of others. At the same time, free workers also laboured hard. A freedman might take pride in his trade and use his earnings to support family, honour patrons, join associations, or commission a tombstone that named his craft. A woman might sell goods, manage accounts, run a tavern, weave, assist in a workshop, or oversee household production. The legal and social world limited many people's options, but the archaeological and epigraphic record suggests a city where women, freed people, migrants, and families participated in economic life in varied ways. The workday begins early because daylight is useful, heat grows, and customers arrive with morning energy. A carpenter checks a measuring line. A lamp maker removes a cooled mould. A seller of garlands arranges flowers before they wilt. A scribe prepares tablets. A man who repairs shoes listens as a customer explains, with unnecessary detail, exactly how the strap broke. Across the street, someone sweeps dust into the road, where it becomes someone else's problem. The atmosphere is busy but not hurried in the modern industrial sense. Some tasks are repetitive, some require waiting. Ovens heat, glue sets, dye takes, clay dries, customers bargain. Apprentices learn by watching and making mistakes. Masters correct them. Hands remember what speech does not explain. As the sun rises higher, the street fills with a steady human tide. People pass between shops and civic spaces, between home and business, between obligation and chance. The sound of work does not remain in the neighbourhoods. It leads outward, toward the larger public places of the city, where transactions, greetings, lawsuits, rumours and ambitions gather beneath columns. So we leave the small shops for a while and follow the morning toward the Forum, not as a marble legend, but as a place ordinary people crossed, used and endured. Some trades leave recognisable remains. A bakery mill can be excavated. A dye vat can stain the earth. A potter's kiln leaves wasters and fragments. Other trades vanish almost completely because their materials were soft, reused, or ordinary. The person who mended baskets, the woman who sold small garlands, the child who carried messages, the worker who cleaned a courtyard may leave no clear archaeological signature. Yet the city required them all. Work also created identity. Inscriptions sometimes proudly name occupations: baker, clothworker, merchant, physician, midwife, actor, soldier, shipper, stonecutter. A trade could be a source of status within a modest community, a way to belong to an association, a reason to be remembered. The elite might rank manual work below landed wealth or public office, but ordinary people knew the dignity of skill. A shoe that holds, a pot that does not crack, a beam that fits, a garment properly finished. These are forms of intelligence. The apprentice watches. That is much of learning. He watches the angle of a wrist, the way a master tests a surface, the moment when clay is too wet or dough too tired or metal ready. Some knowledge can be said. Much must be absorbed. Mistakes are corrected not by long theory, but by doing again. The ancient workshop is a school of repetition, patience, and occasional exasperation. There is a music to tools that modern ears might find strangely soothing after the first surprise. The measured tap of a hammer is different from the impatient strike. The rasp of a file differs from the cut of a saw. A loom has another rhythm. A knife on leather, a brush on cloth, a broom on stone. These are the percussion instruments of ordinary Rome. Customers bring stories with their broken things. A pot cracked because someone dropped it, though they may blame the potter. A sandal failed because it was old, though the owner insists it was almost new. A clasp bent during work, a lamp chipped during travel, a hinge loosened from years of use. Repair workers hear the biographies of objects and the excuses of owners. Small businesses also live with uncertainty. A rainy day changes traffic. A festival changes demand. A rumour can help or hurt. A landlord can raise rent. A supplier can delay. A tool can break at the worst time. The Roman economy may be studied through taxes, trade and coinage, but for the shopkeeper it is felt as a question each morning. Will enough people come through the door? Professional associations, collegia of various kinds, also shaped some working lives, though their exact nature varied widely. People might gather around trade, worship, burial support, neighbourhood ties, or social identity. For ordinary Romans, belonging to a group could provide companionship, status, mutual assistance, and the comfort of being named among others. In a city where many people were far from ancestral homes, associations could become a kind of chosen structure. A worker who seems alone at his bench may therefore belong to wider circles: family, patrons, customers, fellow craftspeople, religious groups, burial clubs, neighbours. Daily labour is individual in the hand, but social in its support. The shop threshold is a place of invitation. Goods near the front say, "Look." The worker visible inside says, "I am capable." The half-finished object says, "This is how value is made." Unlike modern production hidden in distant factories, much urban Roman making happened near the buyer's gaze. This visibility gave work a public character, even when the worker's social status was low. When we hear the word forum, it is easy to imagine ruins at noon, silent columns, tourists, guidebooks, and the solemn weight of old power. But in ancient Rome, the forum was not a ruin. It was not quiet. It was a lived space, ceremonial, legal, religious, commercial, social, and deeply practical. It held grandeur, but also footsteps, dust, waiting, impatience, greetings, errands, and the feeling of being among people who all seem to be going somewhere. By morning, the routes leading toward the forum are busy. Some people come because they must. Some come because they hope to be seen. Some pass through on their way elsewhere. A client attending a patron may walk with a careful expression, neither too humble nor too bold. A trader considers whether a contact can be found. A young man in a clean garment rehearses words for a legal matter. A messenger carries a tablet. A curious child stares at everything until told to keep moving. The Forum Romanum, especially by the early imperial period, was layered with centuries of building and memory. Temples, basilicas, arches, speaker platforms, statues, and offices crowded the space. But the official functions do not erase the ordinary ones. A basilica, despite the later Christian meaning of the word, was a large public hall used for legal and business affairs. Under its roof, people might shelter from sun or rain, conduct transactions, consult advocates, wait for decisions, or simply move through the human noise. The sound here is different from the workshop street. It is broader and more echoing, sandals on stone, voices under colonnades, a public notice being read aloud for those who cannot read or who prefer to hear the interpretation, the murmur of bargaining, the sharper tone of dispute, a vendor threading through the crowd, birds unsettled by movement. Somewhere a formal proceeding begins, but beside it life remains stubbornly informal. Rome's political history often makes the Forum seem like a stage for famous men. It was that sometimes. But most days for most people were not turning points in constitutional history. They were days of waiting, asking, witnessing, making arrangements, settling accounts, seeking signatures, meeting patrons, buying something, selling something, hearing news, or simply crossing a space that belonged to the city. The marble remembered speeches, but the paving stones remembered ordinary feet. In a corner, an older man explains a legal point to someone who does not fully understand it, and perhaps cannot afford to misunderstand it. Roman law was complex and access to knowledge mattered. Documents, witnesses, status, citizenship, contracts, and patronage could shape outcomes. Not every person stood equal before the practical machinery of society, yet people still navigated it, using family ties, patrons, professional helpers, experience, and persistence. Near a statue, two acquaintances pause. They do not discuss emperors. They discuss rent, marriage arrangements, a shipment delayed, a debt, a rumour about a shop changing hands, a child ready for school, the price of grain, the condition of a road. This is one of the secrets of ordinary life in any great capital. The official city may be enormous, but people inhabit it through manageable concerns. A statue may tower overhead while someone worries about a broken latch. The Forum also reminds us how mixed Roman public life could be. Formal social hierarchies existed everywhere, and clothing, entourage, speech and posture could signal rank. Senators and equestrians were not moving through the city in the same way as labourers or enslaved workers. Yet urban density forced proximity. A wealthy man could pass a porter. A magistrate could hear a street seller. A freed woman running an errand could walk beneath the same columns as someone whose family name filled inscriptions. Proximity did not mean equality, but it did mean that Rome was a place where the layers of society touched. Some people come to the Forum because news lives there. In a world without modern media, information travelled through notices, messengers, letters, rumour, recitation, performance, and conversation. A person who could read might scan posted announcements. A person who could not might listen. Literacy in Rome was not universal, but it was useful, and its traces appear in graffiti, labels, tablets, accounts, and inscriptions. The city was full of writing, even for those who relied on others to interpret it. There are religious rhythms too. Temples are not just architectural backdrops. Offerings, vows, processions, calendars, priesthoods, and public rituals tie civic life to divine favour. Yet the ordinary passerby may relate to these places with familiarity rather than awe. A temple seen every day becomes part of orientation. Turn near that shrine, meet beside that column, wait in the shade of that portico. If the script of empire were written only from above, the Forum would belong to officials. From the ground, it belongs also to those who sweep, sell, carry, petition, deliver, wait, and watch. The Forum is a place where Rome tells itself it is eternal, while everyone inside it is thinking about today. By late morning, the sun has strengthened. The stones shine more sharply. The crowd thickens and thins in pockets. Some people move toward business, some toward home, some toward food, some toward schoolrooms where children's voices rise and fall with the repeated sound of letters. We leave the public noise behind and follow the softer scratch of writing into the world of education, records and memory. The Forum's grandeur could be useful even to those who did not own it. A portico gave shade. Steps gave a place to wait. A column became a meeting point. A statue's base became a landmark. The official city created unintended conveniences for ordinary bodies. People who had no role in dedicating a monument could still use its shadow. the same space held different meanings depending on the viewer. To an advocate, the forum might mean clients and cases. To a vendor, it might mean foot traffic. To a provincial visitor, it might mean awe or confusion. To a cleaner, it might mean dust and repetition. To a child, it might mean pigeons, echoes, and the chance of losing sight of an adult in the crowd. Cities do not have one meaning. They are translated by use. It is also possible to feel small in such a place. Surrounded by names, statues, rules, and powerful families, an ordinary person might sense the weight of society. Yet smallness is not the same as insignificance. A person waiting with a petition, carrying a delivery, or searching for a witness may be living a day that matters intensely. History measures with broad instruments. Life measures with the pulse. Public space also teaches posture. In the forum, people learn how to stand while waiting, how to approach someone of higher rank, how to appear patient when anxious, how to look knowledgeable when confused, how to leave without seeming dismissed. Social life is partly choreography. The steps are not written on the stones, but everyone feels when they have been missed. A person new to Rome might find the forum overwhelming. The buildings are not only large, they're crowded with references. A statue means a family. A temple means a vow, a victory, a god, a date. An arch means power remembered in stone. But a newcomer may first need simpler information. Where to stand, whom to ask, which official is which, how not to be cheated, how to find the way home. For someone who crosses it every day, the forum may lose some of its awe and become routine. That is one of the strange powers of daily life. Even grandeur becomes a backdrop when one is late, hungry, or worried about money. The marble remains magnificent. The person passing through is thinking about shoes. Clothing changes in the forum. Not completely, not for everyone, but noticeably. A person may dress more carefully when entering a public space where status can be read quickly. The toga, associated with male citizenship and formal public identity, might appear here more than in a workshop street, though it was cumbersome and not ideal for labour. Tunics, cloaks, footwear, rings, grooming, attendants, and posture all speak. Yet clothing can also mislead. A neat garment may be borrowed, carefully maintained, or worn for one important errand. A worn cloak may cover a person of sharp intelligence. Public Rome reads surfaces because it must, but human beings are always more than the surfaces available to others. The forum is also a place of waiting, and waiting is one of the most historically honest activities. People wait for officials, patrons, witnesses, friends, decisions, payments, and opportunities. Waiting stretches time. It makes the hungry hungrier and the anxious more alert. Beneath Rome's most famous architecture, many ordinary hours must have been spent simply standing. Writing in ancient Rome was everywhere and unevenly shared. It appeared on monuments and tombstones, shop signs and painted notices, military records and legal documents, letters and accounts, wax tablets and walls. Some people read fluently, some recognized names, numbers and useful phrases. Some depended on others. Literacy was not a single condition, but a range of skills shaped by class, gender, occupation, family ambition, and access to teaching. A schoolroom might be simpler than we imagine. It could be a rented space, a corner under a portico, or a room near a street where the voices of children compete with the city outside. The teacher, often not highly paid or socially elevated, listens as students repeat letters, syllables, lines, and moral sayings. The sound is rhythmic, almost drowsy when heard from outside. Voices together, then one voice alone, then correction, then repetition. Children used wax tablets for practice, scratching letters with stylus, smoothing the surface and writing again. Papyrus was more precious, ink more deliberate. Wax allowed learning to be temporary. Mistakes could be erased with the flat end of the stylus. A child presses too hard and gouges the surface. Another shapes a letter beautifully and looks around to see if anyone noticed. The teacher notices errors more reliably than beauty. Education varied widely. Elite boys might advance through grammar, literature, rhetoric, and preparation for public life. Some girls from wealthy or educated families also received instruction, though social expectations differed. Many children learned practical skills at home or in workshops, rather than through extended formal schooling. A future artisan might need counting, measuring, contracts, labels, and perhaps enough writing to manage business. A future household manager needed memory, accounts, judgment, and knowledge not always honoured by formal texts. The Roman educational world valued imitation and memory. Students copied lines, learned stories, absorbed examples from Greek and Latin literature, and practiced speaking. This could seem far from the ordinary worker's street, yet the written word touched even humble lives. A rent agreement, a receipt, a tally, a delivery note, a name on a jar, a curse tablet, a tomb inscription, a shop advertisement. These all belong to the city's practical literacy. Imagine a boy sitting with a tablet on his knees, distracted by the smell of bread and the sound of a cart outside. His family is not elite, but they have paid for some schooling because letters may help him. He repeats the alphabet until the shapes become less strange. He learns numbers because numbers matter. He learns that a word can hold a voice after the speaker has gone. Beside him, perhaps, a girl has been taught at home by a relative or tutor. In some families, girls learned enough to read letters, manage household accounts, and participate in cultivated conversation. We should not imagine Roman women as universally uneducated, nor should we pretend they had the same access to public educational paths as men of high status. The evidence is varied, and the lived reality depended heavily on circumstance. A scribe nearby writes for someone who speaks but does not write well. The client dictates slowly. The scribe shapes the words more elegantly than they were spoken. He knows formulas, greetings, legal phrasing, and how to make a request sound respectful. In a city of hierarchy, the wording of a letter can matter. Too bold, and it offends. Too humble, and it weakens the request. The scribe's skill is not only in letters, but in tone. Letters connected Rome to the wider world. They crossed roads and seas, carried by messengers, traders, soldiers, officials, friends, and family networks. Some were formal, some affectionate, some anxious, some practical. A mother asking about a son, a merchant confirming goods, a soldier requesting supplies, a friend inviting another to dinner, a landowner giving instructions, a freedman maintaining ties. Most have vanished, but enough survive from across the Roman world to remind us that ancient people worried, joked, asked favours, sent thanks, complained about delays, and longed for news. Writing also made memory public. Tombstones are among the most touching documents of ordinary Roman life. They may name a trade, a spouse, a child, a freed status, an age, a virtue, a grief. Some inscriptions are formulaic, others feel startlingly personal. A stone does not restore a whole life, but it resists disappearance. It says, someone loved this person enough, or had enough pride or enough savings to make a name endure. In the schoolroom, the child does not think about tombstones. He thinks about the ache in his fingers and the teacher's impatience. He thinks about lunch. He thinks about the street. Yet each letter he scratches participates in the same broader world. Rome as a city not only of stone, but of marks. Marks on wax, walls, bronze, lead, wood, plaster, pottery, and memory. The teacher dismisses the younger pupils, or perhaps they simply drift into the next part of the day. A tablet is closed, a stylus is tucked away. Outside, the city has grown warmer and louder. Some children return home, some go to help in shops, some carry messages. We follow one of those paths back inward, into the rooms, courtyards, kitchens, and household labour that support the public life outside. The wax tablet is a beautiful object for thinking about memory. It preserves and erases. A message can be sent and then smoothed away. A lesson can be repeated until the surface is scarred with effort. A child may write a line, fail, flatten it, and begin again. The tablet is forgiving in a way stone is not. It belongs to practice, not permanence. Graffiti, by contrast, is sometimes practice that accidentally becomes permanent. On walls in Pompeii and elsewhere, casual writing preserves names, jokes, advertisements, declarations of affection, insults, tallies, and drawings. Some are crude, some charming, some routine, some mysterious. They remind us that ancient people did not always approach writing with solemnity. They scribbled because they were bored, proud, in love, angry, playful, or simply present. For a listener drifting towards sleep, the sound of writing can become almost rain-like. Stylus on wax, reed on papyrus, the tiny pause before a word, the breath of the scribe, the murmur of a student repeating a line. Writing slows speech down. It asks the voice to become a mark. In that slowing, we feel the city remembering itself one small scratch at a time. Numbers are as important as letters. A city of trade needs counting. Measures of grain, rent payments, interest, wages, inheritance shares, shop accounts, tax obligations, and market prices. A person who can count accurately has a defense against confusion and deception. A person who cannot may need someone trustworthy, which is sometimes harder to find than a number. The teacher's authority may be fragile. He may be respected in the room and ignored outside it. He may rely on fees paid irregularly. He may teach children whose families expect too much and pay too little. Education carries dignity, but not always comfort. The sound of recitation may conceal a teacher's own worries about rent and food. Letters also cross emotional distances. A written message can reach a soldier, a merchant, a relative in another town, a patron away from Rome. The hand that writes may not be the hand that feels the words. Dictation complicates intimacy. A scribe can make grief formal, affection polite, anger acceptable, and need persuasive. Writing is never only mechanical, it is social. Timekeeping enters the schoolroom indirectly. Sundials, water clocks in some contexts, and public habits shape the day's schedule. But most ordinary people also read time through light, hunger, noise, and routine. A child knows school is nearly over because the street outside changes. A teacher knows the hour by the slant of light and the restlessness of bodies. Ancient time was structured, but less mechanically uniform than modern time. The Roman hour stretched and contracted with the length of daylight. This alone gives the day a different feeling. Summer hours breathe wide. Winter hours close in. To live by such time is to feel the season inside the clock. A child's mistake on wax leaves no permanent shame. The surface is smoothed, and the lesson begins again. There is kindness in that image. Much of ordinary life offers no such easy erasure, but the tablet does. It gives the learner another line, another attempt, another chance for the hand to remember what the mind has been told. To enter a Roman home is to enter a world shaped by status. There was no single Roman house. The elite domus, with its atrium, tablinum, dining room, decorated walls, and perhaps garden spaces, differed greatly from rented rooms above a shop. A suburban villa differed from a city apartment. A shop house differed from a wealthy residence. Yet across these forms, the household was a central unit of Roman life, economic, emotional, legal, religious, and practical. In an elite house, the entrance could be carefully arranged to impress. The atrium, often with an opening in the roof and a basin below, might receive clients and guests. Family memory could be displayed through images, objects, and inherited names. The house was both private and public, a place where reputation was staged. But we passed through it softly, without making wealth the whole story. For every house designed to project status, there were many rooms designed simply to shelter bodies and store necessities. In a modest household, the work of the home is continuous. Someone sweeps, someone checks clothing, someone counts remaining food, someone repairs a seam, someone tends a small brazier if one is used, someone watches a child, someone negotiates with a neighbour, someone prepares to go out again. The household is not a pause from labour, it is one of labour's main locations. Roman family structure was shaped legally by the authority of the paterfamilias, the male head of household, but lived families were more varied and more human than a legal formula. Death, remarriage, adoption, enslavement, manumission, migration, business partnerships, patronage, and poverty all shaped household arrangements. A Roman family might include freeborn relatives, freed people, enslaved workers, apprentices, lodgers, clients, and dependents. The boundaries of household, business, and social network could overlap. Women in Roman households had varied roles depending on status, wealth, and circumstance. Elite ideals often praised modesty, woolworking, fidelity, and household management. In practice, women could manage property, run businesses, lend money, sell goods, supervise labour, raise children, and appear in inscriptions as patrons, traders, priestesses, and benefactors. Legal restrictions and social expectations were real, but so was women's economic presence. The ordinary city would have been impossible without it. Children moved through these spaces with duties appropriate to age, status, and family condition. A wealthy child might have tutors, toys, attendants, and expectations. A poorer child might help with errands, watch siblings, assist in work, or begin training early. Childhood existed, but it was not protected in the same ways modern childhood ideally is. Still, affection appears in toys, portraits, epitaphs, and the care with which families remembered lost children. Ancient parents were not less human because their world was different. Household gods, especially the lares and penates in many domestic contexts, connected family life to ritual. A small shrine, or lararium, might hold images or painted figures. Offerings could be simple, a bit of food, wine, incense, flowers, or a gesture of respect. These rituals did not need to be dramatic. They belonged to the maintenance of relationship between household, ancestors, place, and divine protection. In a quiet home, a morning or midday offering could be as ordinary as sweeping the threshold. Labour inside the household often depended on enslaved people, especially in wealthier homes. They cooked, cleaned, carried messages, dressed owners, cared for children, managed accounts, taught, entertained, and performed skilled work. Their experiences varied enormously, and ancient sources often speak about them from the perspective of owners. A historically grounded script must remember that behind a polished dining room stood many hands, not all free. We can let that fact rest in the room without turning the episode toward harsh detail. Consider a kitchen area in a prosperous home. It is not the grandest space, but it is one of the most alive. Heat, knives, pots, baskets, oil, herbs, grain, fish sauce, smoke, and commands. The people working there know timing better than the diners who will later recline and eat. They know what must be used before it spoils, which guest dislikes a flavour, which jar is nearly empty, which market seller cheats, which pot has a crack. Their knowledge is domestic, practical, and often uncelebrated. In a rented room, the same hour looks different. A mother or father returns with water. A piece of bread is divided. A garment is patched near the light. The household shrine may be small or absent. There may be no private kitchen in the sense a modern person expects. The family negotiates space, where to sleep, where to store tools, where to keep food away from pests, how to maintain dignity when privacy is scarce. The room contains fatigue, affection, irritation, and ordinary tenderness. A neighbour knocks to borrow something. In close housing, neighbours could be support, nuisance, witness, and danger all at once. They heard quarrels, shared news, lent tools, watched children, complained about noise, warned about landlords, and built the social fabric of the building. Rome's density created friction, but also familiarity. To live above a street was to belong to an unchosen chorus. The household is where public Rome becomes personal. Laws, markets, water systems, grain supply, social hierarchy, religion and labour all arrive here in the shape of a loaf, a jar, a bill, a child, a torn sleeve, a guest, a prayer. Ancient history often preserves the public face of society, but daily life spent much of itself indoors, in the management of small needs. By midday, food must be considered again. The city does not simply consume, it must constantly supply itself. From the household we turn outward, following the paths by which grain, oil, wine, vegetables, fish, animals, spices and pottery enter Rome's appetite. Household objects create a quiet inventory of care. Needles, spindle whorls, combs, lamps, keys, cooking vessels, storage jars, toys, amulets and small figurines all tell us that home was made through repeated attention. A key suggests something worth protecting. A toy suggests a child who needed delight. A comb suggests the daily arrangement of the body before meeting the world. These objects are modest, but they are intimate. The threshold is another important place. It separates and connects. It is where guests are received, goods delivered, greetings exchanged, and danger kept outside when possible. Some thresholds were marked by mosaics, inscriptions, or protective imagery. Even a simple doorway has meaning. To step across it is to leave one set of expectations and enter another. In the evening or midday quiet, a household may sound like small work. Thread drawn through cloth, a knife chopping herbs, a broom, a child's question, a lid lifted, a whispered instruction, the clink of a cup. These sounds do not announce themselves as history, but they are the substance from which most lives are made. Public events interrupt life. Domestic routines sustain it. The Roman home contains time in layers. There are objects inherited from elders, tools used today, food prepared for tonight, and children being trained for a future no one can see. A household is always keeping the past usable while trying to make tomorrow possible. This is true in palaces and rented rooms, though the resources differ greatly. In a wealthy home, decoration may create ideals: painted gardens, mythological heroes, elegant architecture, images of abundance and refinement. In a modest home, decoration may be limited to a small image: a lamp with a moulded scene, a bright cloth, a polished cup, or a shrine. Beauty is not absent from poverty, but it must often be portable, durable, or improvised. Household labour has rhythms that outsiders rarely honour. Washing, mending, cooking, storing, sweeping, caring, teaching, soothing, watching, remembering. These tasks repeat so often they can seem invisible. Yet if they stop, life quickly unravels. The quiet power of the household lies in preventing collapse before anyone notices it was possible. Pets and small animals sometimes entered domestic life too, though evidence varies by place and household. Dogs appear in art, inscriptions and remains. Birds could be kept. Animals might be loved, useful, annoying, or all three. A child feeding a small dog at the threshold is not impossible to imagine, and such a moment helps remind us that Roman households were emotional spaces as well as economic ones. The home held affection in practical forms: saving a portion, mending someone's garment, remembering a preference, making space to sleep, teaching a child a prayer, keeping an object from a deceased relative. These are quiet acts. Ancient tenderness often hides behind ordinary maintenance. The home is also where illness is first noticed and first managed. A cough, a fever, a child's unusual quietness, an older person's pain, a worker's sore hand. These enter household planning immediately. Ancient medicine existed in many forms, from learned physicians to folk remedies to prayers and practical nursing. But the first care was often domestic: watching, feeding, cooling, warming, waiting. Rome's appetite was enormous. Every morning, every noon, every evening, the city had to answer the same question: how do so many people eat? The answer lay not in one marketplace, but in a vast web of farms, roads, rivers, ships, warehouses, mills, stalls, laws, taxes, contracts, labourers, animals, weather, and luck. A market street offers the visible end of that web. There are vegetables in baskets, fruit according to season, cheeses, eggs, beans, lentils, onions, garlic, greens, fish, if fresh supply allows, salted products, oil, wine, bread, and prepared foods. Sellers call out without sounding like performers in a play. Their voices are practical. They know which goods need attention, which are fading, which can be praised honestly, and which must be sold quickly before honesty becomes inconvenient. The shopper moves with judgment. A melon is pressed, a fish is inspected, a measure of grain is watched carefully. Roman commerce depended on weights, measures, trust, suspicion, and habit. People had favourite sellers and sellers they avoided. Bargaining existed, but so did routine pricing and the simple pressure of needing to buy before the best goods were gone. A person with limited money shops differently from a household servant spending someone else's funds, and differently again from a cook planning for a dinner with guests. Oil was central to Roman life. Olive oil belonged in cooking, lamps, bathing, religious offerings, and bodily care. Amphorae carried it across seas and rivers. The broken remains of oil amphorae, especially in places such as Monte Testaccio in Rome, remind us of consumption at a scale almost difficult to picture. A hill of pottery fragments becomes a monument not to victory, but to appetite, administration, and everyday use. Wine, too, was ordinary, though often diluted with water. It varied in quality, price, and reputation. Some wines were famous, others were cheap and local. Wine belonged to meals, taverns, offerings, medicine, celebration, and habit. A cellar might know how to praise a wine beyond its merits. A customer might know and buy it anyway. Fish sauce, including varieties often grouped under names like garum or liquamen, is one of the tastes that can make Roman cuisine feel distant from modern expectations, though fermented sauces exist in many food traditions. It added salt, depth, and flavour. Amphorae that once held such products travelled widely. Their labels and residues help scholars trace production and distribution. For an ordinary cook, however, the question was simpler. How much can we afford, and how strong is it? The grain supply was the backbone. Rome's population, perhaps reaching around 1 million at certain points, though estimates vary, depended heavily on imported grain. State involvement in grain distribution, the annona, became a major feature of Roman urban life. Some citizens received subsidized or free grain under particular systems and periods. Behind that distribution stood administration, shipping seasons, storage, milling, and the constant anxiety of scarcity. A calm day in the city rests partly on the successful arrival of ships no listener can see. Imagine the path of a single measure of grain. It grows far from Rome in a field worked by hands we will never know. It is harvested, stored, transported to a port, loaded into a ship, carried across uncertain water, unloaded near the mouth of the Tiber, recorded, stored again, moved upriver or by road, milled, baked, sold or distributed, and finally broken by someone in a rented room. The loaf is local in the hand and Mediterranean in its history. Markets also brought the empire's diversity into daily contact. Spices, cloth, glass, pottery, fruits, and stories travelled with merchants and migrants. Rome could be cosmopolitan not only because officials governed provinces, but because goods and people met in practical spaces. A person buying dates might not think of imperial geography, but the fruit carries one. A lamp made in a workshop far away might burn on a Roman shelf. A style of pottery, a word, a recipe, a cloth pattern, or a religious image could cross borders with trade. This abundance did not mean everyone ate well. Inequality shaped diet. A wealthy dinner could involve multiple courses, imported flavours, entertainment and display. A poor household might rely on bread, pulses, cheap wine, occasional vegetables, and whatever could be stretched. Seasonal shortages, price changes, illness, and unemployment could turn food from routine to worry. Still, on an ordinary day, the market is full of choice, calculation, and human attention. A market is also a theatre of trust. The seller smiles, the buyer doubts, the scale swings. A child reaches for a fig, a cook rejects wilted greens with visible offence. A porter waits for instructions. A woman selling herbs ties bundles with quick fingers. A man selling second-quality oil insists it is excellent for lamps, if not for cooking. People complain that everything was cheaper in their youth. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps they always say that. By late morning, baskets are lighter. The sun has reached more of the street. Flies discover opportunities. Sellers shade what they can. Buyers withdraw toward homes, shops, or public spaces. The city has taken another breath of food and will exhale labour, conversation, and rest. Soon the day bends toward midday, and the hardest brightness begins. People seek shade, water, shrines, courtyards, and the small pauses that let a hot city continue without breaking its rhythm. Storage is one of the hidden arts of feeding a city. Amphorae, sacks, bins, jars, warehouses, cellars, and sealed containers all extend time. They allow harvest to become future meal, distant oil to become local lamp, wine pressed months earlier to appear at an evening table. The Romans were skilled organizers of storage because without storage, abundance disappears quickly. The market also depends on trust in labels and containers. Amphorae could bear stamps or painted inscriptions indicating origin, contents, weight, or merchant information. Such marks are invaluable to historians, but in their own day they were practical tools. They told shippers, sellers, and officials what was being moved. They made goods legible in a system too large for personal familiarity alone. Imagine the warehouse near the river. High spaces, stacked containers, dust in shafts of light, clerks or workers tracking goods, the smell of oil, grain, rope, and damp air. The market stall is lively, but the warehouse is patient. It waits behind the day's abundance, holding the city's tomorrow in shadow. Weather far away could reach Rome as price. A storm at sea, a poor harvest, a delay on a road, a damaged warehouse, a dispute among suppliers. These events might become dearer bread or a missing ingredient weeks later. The city depended on places most residents would never see. To live in Rome was to be connected to distant fields without necessarily knowing their names. Porters and carriers made supply visible at street level. They bent under loads, guided animals, balanced baskets, and moved goods the final short distances that are never short when the weight is real. Their labour translated trade into availability. A ship may cross the sea, but someone still must carry the sack. The market's abundance is therefore not effortless but assembled. Every pile of onions, every jar of oil, every basket of figs represents a chain of decisions and exertions. To walk through the market with this in mind is to see not just goods, but relationships. Farmer to shipper, shipper to warehouse, warehouse to seller, seller to cook, cook to household, household to memory. Packaging had its own afterlife. Amphorae might be reused, broken, discarded, or built into fill. Baskets wore out. Sacks were patched. Jars became storage for something different from their first contents. The movement of goods did not end at purchase. Containers entered households and workshops, taking on new purposes until they broke or were no longer worth keeping. Waste, too, tells history. What a city throws away reveals what it consumes, imports, repairs, and abandons. Archaeologists learn from rubbish because daily life is generous in its losses. A broken lamp, a cracked bowl, an animal bone, a seed, a label, a shard, each is a quiet witness. One reason markets are good for a sleep narration is that they move slowly when observed closely. A hand tests a peach. A seller ties a bundle. Oil glugs into a vessel. Grain is measured. A fish scale catches light. A basket handle creaks. These are not large events, but they create the texture of abundance and need, which is the true drama of food. Midday in Rome arrives not all at once, but as a pressure. The sun climbs above roof lines, finds the open stones, and turns pale walls bright. Sounds change. Morning voices that were quick and sharp become slower. The smell of food stalls deepens. Animals stand with lowered heads. People look for shade with the wisdom of those who know the city by season. The Roman day did not always follow modern work patterns. Many tasks began early, and the hottest hours could bring a pause, especially when heat made labour difficult. The pause was not universal. Some people had to keep working. Ovens did not cool because the sun was high. Customers did not vanish entirely. Enslaved workers, porters, cooks, attendants, and the poor often had less freedom to rest. But across the city the pace shifts. A person who can sit, sits. A person who can move into shade, moves. A fountain becomes again the centre of a small world. Morning urgency has passed, but water remains necessary. Someone splashes their face. Someone fills a cup. Someone rinses hands. The basin has seen jars, gossip, impatience, and relief. It is not ornamental in the modern sense. It is public life made liquid. Near the fountain, a small shrine receives attention. It may be a crossroad shrine associated with the Lares Compitals, or a neighbourhood sacred place known to those who live nearby. The Romans were deeply ritual-minded, but their religious life was not always solemn in the way later observers imagine. It could be formal, civic, domestic, practical, festive, contractual, grateful, anxious, or habitual. A passerby might offer a brief gesture not because the moment is dramatic, but because such gestures keep the world in order. The city contains many kinds of sacred space. Great temples stand in public areas, but smaller shrines appear near homes, streets, workshops, and thresholds. Household lararia hold protective figures. Shops might honour gods associated with trade, luck, or craft. Sailors, soldiers, freed people, foreigners, and families brought their own devotions. Rome's religious landscape was layered, and in the early empire it included deities and cults from across the Mediterranean. For the ordinary person, religion was less a weekly compartment than a pattern woven into meals, journeys, business openings, contracts, births, deaths, and uncertain moments. At midday the shrine is quiet. A bit of incense might smoulder. A small offering rests where many small offerings have rested before. The stone or plaster is worn not by history, but by touch. No one stays long. The pause is enough. In a shaded portico people gather. Porticos were useful urban spaces, covered walkways where one could escape sun or rain, meet others, look at art or inscriptions, conduct business, or simply remain in public without standing in the street. The shade has its own social rules. Some people are welcome in certain spaces more than others. Status follows the body. Yet shade itself is democratic in desire. Everyone wants it. A man removes his sandals briefly and rubs one foot. A woman adjusts a basket and watches the street without seeming to. A child grows sleepy and leans against an adult's knee. A scribe closes his tablets for a moment. Two workers sit with bread and olives, speaking little because morning has used their voices. A dog lies in the narrow shadow made by a column, perfectly aligned with survival. This is a good hour to notice textures. The stone of the portico is smoother where feet pass. The plaster on a wall shows repairs. A painted notice has faded at the edges. A bronze fitting is warm to the touch. A clay cup sweats slightly where cool water meets hot air. The city is not an illustration. It is material. It has surfaces, temperatures, weights, and small failures. Midday also brings a kind of loneliness, not sadness exactly, but the reflective loneliness of a city pausing. When movement slows, you can feel how many lives are close by and still unreachable. Behind each door is a private worry. Behind each public face is a morning already lived. A woman buying herbs may be thinking of a sick relative. A young apprentice may be counting days until a festival. A freedman may be remembering the person he used to be before freedom changed his name but not every obligation. A child may be thinking only of the next sweet thing. The city does not explain itself. It simply continues. From the shade you can hear distant water, a hammer beginning again, a cellar calling weakly in the heat, and somewhere, perhaps, the invitation of the baths. By afternoon, many Romans who could spare the time might go to bathe, exercise lightly, meet acquaintances, and rest in steam and stone. The baths were not only about cleanliness, they were architecture made social, and in their warm rooms the city softened in another way. Shade has geography. The same street offers different shelter at different hours. People who live there know when a wall becomes useful, when a portico fills, when the shadow of a taller building reaches the fountain. This knowledge is rarely written down because everyone who needs it learns it by standing in the sun. Small shrines also mark belonging. A person may not know every god honoured in every district of Rome, but they may know the shrine at the corner, the festival that brings neighbours together, the household ritual taught by a mother or father, the offering made before a journey. In a vast city, the sacred becomes local through repetition. It attaches itself to the path you walk every day. The midday pause is not empty. It is recovery. Muscles cool, tempers settle, decisions wait until the heat passes. In this hour, even ambition may seem tired. The city does not stop, but it lowers its voice, and in that lowered voice we hear the human need for intervals. In the hottest part of the day, surfaces seem to speak. A white wall says, "Do not touch me." A shaded stone bench says, "Stay." A bronze handle says, "Quickly." A clay cup says, "Drink before the water warms." The city teaches through temperature. A small shrine may be cleaned by someone whose name is never recorded. Dust removed, flowers replaced, ash cleared, paint touched, offerings arranged. Care of sacred places often depends on modest labour. The god may receive the prayer, but the shrine receives the broom. This hour invites memory. With work paused, thoughts rise. A person may remember a village left behind, a parent, a first arrival in Rome, a former owner, a lost child, a debt forgiven, a promise made at a shrine. The city is full of private pasts. Midday quiet gives them room. Public latrines and sanitation systems, where available, formed another part of the urban day, though not one a sleep script needs to dwell on too closely. It is enough to remember that Roman infrastructure included drains, sewers in some areas, latrines and water management, while also falling short of modern sanitation. Ancient urban life required constant negotiation with cleanliness, smell, waste, and convenience. This balance is important. Rome was neither a sparkling marble fantasy nor a place of unrelieved discomfort. It was a functioning ancient city, ingenious in some systems, limited in others, always maintained by human labour. In the shade, people may become briefly equal in posture if not in status. The rich and poor alike know the relief of escaping the sun, though one may have more choices than the other. A person with business can pause beside a person with none. For a few minutes the city arranges itself not by rank but by shadow. The baths are among the most inviting spaces of ancient Rome, especially for a sleep story, because they combine water, warmth, echo, and human routine. They were public, social, practical, and sensory. Large imperial bath complexes could be magnificent, but smaller neighbourhood baths also mattered. By the early empire, bathing was part of urban life across much of the Roman world, though habits and access varied. Approaching the baths in the afternoon, you feel the mood change before entering. The street outside has a mild bustle. People arrive with towels, oil flasks, strigils for scraping oil and dirt from the skin, sandals, perhaps companions. Some come after work. Some come as part of leisure. Some come to meet contacts, hear news, exercise, or simply enjoy a few hours in a space larger and more comfortable than home. The entrance leads into a sequence of rooms whose names may vary by arrangement. The apoditerium for changing, the tepidarium warm and temperate, the caldarium hot and steamy, the frigidarium cool, perhaps exercise yards or palestrae, pools, latrines, service spaces, furnaces, and corridors. The baths are not silent. Voices echo against stone, water slaps gently, sandals scrape, attendants call, someone laughs too loudly and then lowers his voice because sound multiplies under vaults. In the changing room, belongings are set aside. Theft could be a concern, and ancient writers mention it with irritation. Some bathers brought attendants or hired someone to watch possessions. Others simply trusted, worried, or accepted the risk. The act of undressing in a public environment may seem strange to modern listeners, but public bathing had its own customs and expectations. The body here was not hidden in the same way. It was washed, oiled, scraped, warmed, cooled, and restored, among others. The warm room is gentle. Heat enters slowly. The body loosens. Outside, the city is stone, dust, obligation, and sunlight. Inside, warmth makes time feel thicker. Conversations drift. A merchant speaks with a client. Two friends discuss a household matter. An older man complains about young men, which may be one of history's oldest forms of exercise. A quiet bather says nothing, letting the heat take the morning from his shoulders. The hot room carries steam. The caldarium, heated by systems that could include hypercoursed floors and wall channels in better equipped baths, reveals Roman engineering in intimate form. We often admire aqueducts and roads from a distance, but heated bathing shows infrastructure touching the skin. Furnaces burn. Workers maintain heat. Water is managed. Stone and brick hold warmth. The comfort of the bath depends on unseen labour below and behind the rooms. Oil is applied to the skin, sometimes scented for those who can afford it. The strigil scrapes away oil, sweat, and dust. This practice, common in Greco-Roman bathing culture, is both cleansing and tactile. The motion has a soft rasp. A person emerges less burdened by the day. Perhaps not clean by modern standards of soap and privacy, but clean within the expectations and technologies of the time. Then comes the cool room or pool, a shock that wakes the body gently after heat. The frigidarium can feel like a breath drawn sharply and released. Water closes around shoulders. Voices change pitch. Someone hesitates at the edge, encouraged by friends who are not as sympathetic as they pretend. Another enters without ceremony, used to the routine. The baths were socially mixed, though not without hierarchy. The cost of entry could be low in many cases, sometimes subsidized or associated with benefactions, making baths accessible to a broad range of free urban residents. Men and women might bathe at different times or in different spaces depending on local practice and period. Evidence varies, and moralists sometimes complained about customs. Enslaved attendants, workers, cleaners, furnace operators, and service staff helped make the experience possible. As always in Rome, leisure for some rested on labour by others. Baths also served health, or at least what Romans understood as health. Ancient medical ideas differed from modern medicine, but bathing, exercise, massage, oiling, diet, and balance were part of bodily care. A person might come to the baths to recover from strain, socialize, relieve stiffness, or follow advice. The routines were physical and mental. to pass from warm to hot to cool was to move through a small architecture of transformation. In the palestra or exercise area, some play ball, stretch, or move lightly. Not everyone is athletic. Some are there to watch, talk, or be seen. A young man tries to impress someone and fails in a way that will be remembered by his friends. A serious athlete ignores everyone. An older bather makes one careful movement and declares it sufficient exercise. The most sleep-friendly part of the baths is perhaps the moment after bathing, when the body is warm, clean, and slightly tired. A person sits in the temperate air, hair damp, skin oiled, thoughts softened. The city beyond the walls remains enormous, but for a little while it cannot enter fully. The baths create an interval, not home, not work, not temple, not market, but a shared pause in which strangers and neighbours exist together in steam. Eventually people dress again. Belts are tied, sandals fastened, oil flasks gathered. Conversations continue through the doorway and into the cooling afternoon. Some will return to work, some will go to dinner, some will carry news from the baths into households, taverns and shops. The day begins its descent toward evening, and with it comes the quieter centre of domestic life, the meal, the lamp, and the household gods. The engineering of the baths is easy to admire, but the lived experience matters more for our walk. A bather may not think about the exact design of the hypocaust. He feels warmth rising from below. He feels the floor through sandals made for the bath. He sees steam blur the outlines of other bodies. Technology becomes atmosphere. The bath attendant's day is different. He sees the same rooms not as relaxation but as work. Belongings to watch, water to manage, floors to clean, customers to answer, heat to maintain, complaints to endure. He knows who tips, who loses things, who boasts, who comes only to talk, who lingers too long. Every leisure space contains workers who know it more deeply than the guests. After bathing, the city can feel new for a few minutes. Dust has been scraped away. Heat has been answered with cool water. The mind is slightly loosened. A person steps outside and hears the street again, but not quite as before. This may be one reason baths mattered so much. They offered an ordinary rebirth, modest and repeatable, in the middle of a demanding city. The baths are also democratic in one limited sense. Many different bodies share the same heat. Status does not vanish, and access is not perfectly equal, but sweat makes rank less visible for a moment. A fine ring may still show wealth. An attendant may still reveal dependence. Yet the human body under steam is a humbling thing. Everyone has shoulders, skin, fatigue, and the need to wash. Conversation in the baths can be casual because the setting loosens formality. A business matter begins as a remark. A dinner invitation is made near a pool. A rumour is tested. A poem is quoted badly. Someone asks after a relative. Someone gives medical advice with confidence not matched by knowledge. The baths circulate talk almost as efficiently as they circulate water. Leaving the baths, a person may buy a snack, adjust a cloak, or pause outside before returning to the claims of household and work. That small reluctance is familiar across time, the wish to keep a restful interval from ending. But the evening waits, and Rome has no shortage of claims. The baths also contain decoration. Mosaics underfoot, painted walls, marble surfaces in richer complexes, statues, pools, and changing light could turn ordinary bathing into an encounter with beauty. Even a person who could not afford a grand home might spend part of an afternoon in a space shaped by ambitious architecture. Public benefaction allowed some luxuries to be shared, though unevenly and with social meanings attached. Beauty in the baths is not merely ornamental. It changes the bather's sense of self. To stand beneath a vaulted ceiling, hear water echo and feel warm air rising from engineered floors is to experience the city as capable of care, even if that care is partial and dependent on many workers. The sequence of hot and cool rooms gives the afternoon a shape. Instead of one undifferentiated rest, the body moves through stages. Undress, warm, heat, scrape, cool, dress, return. Ritual does not always require prayer. Sometimes a repeated bodily order becomes its own kind of ritual, especially when it marks the passage from workday to evening. Evening in Rome does not fall suddenly. It gathers in the angles of buildings, in the cooling of stone, in the way voices relax after the business of the day. Shopkeepers count what has been earned and what has not. Workers clean tools. Bakers prepare for another cycle. Children are called back from doorways. The city is still busy, but its energy changes direction, turning gradually toward food, family, rest, and light. And the evening meal, cena, could vary enormously. For the wealthy, dinner might be the main meal of the day, with courses, guests, couches, servants, conversation, display, and carefully arranged hospitality. For many ordinary people the meal was simpler. Bread, porridge, pulses, vegetables, cheese, olives, fruit, perhaps fish or meat when available, leftovers, watered wine, or something purchased from a stall. The word dinner can mislead if it makes us imagine one standard table. Rome had many tables, many counters, many laps, many shared bowls. In a modest room, a family gathers around what they have. The meal may not be formal, but it has its own order. Bread is divided. A pot is opened. Someone receives a larger portion because they worked hard. Someone complains. Someone else points out that complaints do not create more food. The room is warmer now, full of the smell of the day carried in clothing, dust, oil, wool, smoke, street, bath water, bread. The meal does not erase fatigue, but it gives fatigue a place to sit. In a more prosperous home, the dining room is arranged for reclining, at least among those following elite customs. Couches, small tables, dishes, lamps, serving vessels, and decoration create a setting in which eating becomes social performance. Guests are ranked by placement and attention. Conversation may include literature, gossip, business, family alliances, jokes, philosophical remarks, and silent calculations. Food is not only nourishment, it is hospitality, status, taste, and relationship. We will not linger on excess, because tonight's Rome is not a spectacle of luxury. But it is useful to notice the contrast. The same city that holds a rented upstairs room may also hold a dining room painted with gardens that never wilt, mythological scenes, columns, birds, fruit, and impossible architecture. The wall opens into fantasy, while real people serve real food. Roman houses could use art to extend space, soften walls, and display culture. A guest reclining beneath painted vines might feel surrounded by abundance even in the centre of a crowded city. In both modest and wealthy homes, the household gods remain near. A lararium might stand in an atrium, a kitchen area, a courtyard, or another suitable place. Small figures or painted images of lares, snakes, offerings, and other symbols could represent protection, continuity, and domestic ritual. At evening, a household might make a small offering or acknowledgement. Not every family did everything in the same way, and religious practice was shaped by tradition, region, status, and personal devotion. but the idea of tending the relationship between household and divine guardians was familiar. A little wine is poured, a bit of food is placed, a flame is adjusted. The gesture is small enough to fit into daily life, which may be why it matters. Great temples belong to the city. Household shrines belong to the rhythm of returning. They mark the home as more than shelter. They connect the day's labour to memory, protection, and gratitude. For enslaved members of a household, evening could mean more work. Serving dinner, cleaning, preparing beds, attending owners, guarding doors, caring for children, maintaining lamps, and clearing dishes extended the labour day. Some enslaved people in skilled or trusted roles had complex relationships within households. Others had little security or recognition. The calm surface of evening should not hide this, but neither should the script turn away from ordinary detail. A servant hand fills a cup. A cook listens from another room to learn whether the food has pleased. A tired attendant waits for dismissal. In a shop house, the evening meal may happen after the counter is closed, but before all business is done. Accounts must be checked. A supplier must be paid tomorrow. A tool is missing. A customer promised to return and did not. A child falls asleep before finishing food. The lamp burns with a steady, slightly smoky light. Shadows move against plaster. Someone tells a story from the day, not because it is important, but because telling it makes the day complete. Roman meals were also moments of texture. Rough bread crust, oil on fingers, the salt of olives, the softness of beans, the sweetness of figs, the sourness of wine, the clay cup against the lip. Food history can become a list of ingredients, but eating is bodily and immediate. The ancient world is closest when we imagine a person pausing after a mouthful, listening to someone speak, feeling the evening air cool through an open window. Outside, the street stalls do not all close at once. Taverns and popinae may continue serving. Some people eat away from home by necessity or habit. Others drink, talk, argue, flirt, sing, or simply avoid returning to a crowded room. Elite writers often judge such places harshly, but their judgments cannot erase their usefulness. Public eating and drinking places were part of the urban fabric, especially for those whose homes were small or whose work kept them outside. The household meal ends in stages. Dishes are cleared, lamps are checked, a child is washed or at least wiped into an acceptable state. A garment is folded, a door is barred, a final errand is remembered too late and postponed until morning. The day has not ended, but it has softened. Now the light belongs increasingly to lamps, stars, moon if there is one, and the glow that escapes from doors. We follow that light upward and outward, to rooftops, upper windows, and night streets where Rome becomes once more a city of shadows, footsteps, and quiet watchfulness. The lamp is lit before the room is fully dark. This timing is practical and symbolic. Light is easier to tend before darkness has taken over. Someone trims a wick. Someone checks the oil. A child watches the flame appear as if it is always a small surprise. The lamp does not banish night entirely, it negotiates with it. At dinner, stories from the day are sorted. Some are worth telling in detail, some become only a phrase. The market seller was rude, the teacher was strict, the bath was crowded, the patron was generous or was not. A neighbour's cousin arrived from the coast. A jar broke. A coin was found. None of this will be carved on stone, but tonight it fills the room. The household gods witness these small reports, whether imagined as protectors, ancestral presences, or familiar divine powers. They belong to the idea that a household has continuity beyond one day. People are born, age, marry, leave, return, die, and are remembered. The shrine remains, tended by new hands. In that sense, the home has its own history, more fragile than Rome's public monuments, and perhaps more tender. Food at evening can reveal the day's success. If business was good, there may be a little extra. If not, the meal is stretched. Ancient households understood elasticity. Add water, add grain, divide smaller, save the better portion for someone who needs strength, pretend not to want more. Such strategies are quiet and ancient. The dining space, whether grand or humble, becomes a place of listening. People hear not only words but moods. A heavy step tells of bad news. A cheerful voice at the door changes the room. Silence over food can be peaceful or tense. The household reads itself while eating. After the meal, cleaning begins. This is another ending that is also preparation. Vessels washed or wiped, food stored, crumbs swept, lamps checked, tools set aside, embers controlled. The care taken tonight becomes the ease of tomorrow morning. Domestic time is circular in this way. Every evening is already thinking of dawn. Guests, when present, change the household atmosphere. The same room that is relaxed among family becomes alert. Better cups may be used. A cloak is moved out of sight. Children are instructed to behave. Servants or younger relatives are given tasks. Conversation avoids certain subjects and circles toward others. Hospitality is generous, but it is also performance. For ordinary households, even a small guest can matter. Sharing food creates obligation, warmth, memory, and sometimes strain. A person invited tonight may return the kindness later. In a city where formal safety nets were limited, social bonds were practical as well as emotional. Even a plain meal can contain ceremony if it is repeated with care. The same place to sit, the same cup, the same person dividing bread, the same joke, the same complaint about prices, the same reminder to save some for morning. Repetition does not empty life of meaning. Often, repetition is how meaning becomes livable. Night returns to Rome by degrees. First the sun leaves the higher walls, then the lower streets lose their colour, then the city begins to make its own small stars. Oil lamps in rooms, torches in movement, glimmers at shrines, faint light from taverns, a glow near a bakery oven, the soft reflection of flame on polished metal or water. An oil lamp is a modest object, but in the ancient city it changes everything. Made of clay, bronze, or other materials depending on means, filled with oil, fitted with a wick, it creates a circle of usable night. Around that circle, people mend, talk, count coins, tell stories, soothe children, write letters, prepare tools, or stare quietly into thought. The lamp also smokes, smells, needs tending, and consumes oil. Light is not effortless. Darkness is always waiting at the edge. In an upstairs room, the lamp makes the walls feel closer. The day outside is reduced to memory. A jar stands by the door for morning. Sandals rest where they can be found in the dark. A cloak is folded. The room holds heat from the day, but cooler air begins to enter through gaps and shutters. Voices from neighbouring rooms become more distinct. Someone laughs, someone hushes a child, someone coughs. A couple speaks in low tones. A pot is set down too hard, followed by an apology or by silence. Rooftops and upper windows offer another roam. From above, the street is a channel of darkness between buildings. The city spreads irregularly, not as a perfect plan, but as accumulated life. You might see the outline of hills, the vague shapes of larger monuments, the darker mass of temples, the occasional torch moving like a thought through the night. The Tiber may be invisible, but its presence remains in the air, in the routes that lead toward it, in the goods it brought. A person steps onto a roof or balcony for cooler air. The day has been long. Below, a late cart passes, perhaps carrying goods timed for the hours when streets are easier to navigate. The wheels make a sound that belongs to Rome's nights. Some ancient writers complained about nighttime noise, and it is easy to understand why. A city that restricts certain traffic by day may pay for it in sleep. Yet tonight we let the sound remain soft, distant enough to become part of the atmosphere rather than a disturbance. The night streets are not empty. There are workers whose tasks belong to darkness or necessity. Bakers, porters, watchmen, attendants, travellers arriving late, people leaving taverns, messengers, perhaps thieves, though we do not follow them closely. The vigils, Rome's watchmen and firefighting force, formed an important part of urban night order under the Empire. Fire was a constant concern in a dense city of timber, lamps, ovens, and crowded housing. The watch cannot make danger vanish, but their movement through the streets suggests an attempt to manage the city's vulnerability. A watchman passes with a lamp or torch, listening as much as looking. He knows the smell of a dangerous fire compared to an ordinary hearth. He knows which doorways collect sleepers, which corners invite trouble, which shopkeepers are careless with embers, which buildings have complained recently about cracks or leaks. His work is part routine, part attention. Most nights, nothing memorable happens. That is the success of the job. At a household shrine, the last light trembles. A small offering from earlier remains. Religion at night can feel more intimate than in daylight. The gods of the house are near the sleeping bodies. Ancestors, protective spirits, and divine figures belong to the sense that a home is held together by more than walls. Whether one believes strongly, habitually, anxiously, or simply because one's family always has, the gesture creates continuity. In a tavern, the mood is louder, but we pass by gently. A few people remain over wine, their voices thick with the end of the day. They are not symbols of moral decline, no matter what certain elite authors might have suggested. They are tired, sociable, lonely, careless, cheerful, or avoiding some trouble at home. Ancient cities gave people many reasons to linger outside. In a wealthier house, lamps burn in more rooms. Perhaps a guest has stayed late. Perhaps a letter is being read aloud. Perhaps accounts are checked by someone trusted. The household is quieter but not asleep. Those who serve may still be moving after others have reclined into comfort. In the kitchen area, embers are managed carefully. In storage, jars are sealed. In an entryway, a door is secured. The city cools. Stone releases heat slowly. The smells of the day thin but do not disappear. Bread, smoke, oil, water, sweat, garlands, animals and dust settle into night. Somewhere, a baby begins crying, and after a moment another voice begins the low, patient sound that parents have used in every age. Somewhere else a person lies awake thinking of debt. Another thinks of a lover. Another of a shipment. Another of nothing at all blessed by exhaustion. Rome beyond the emperors is most visible at night because the official city withdraws. No public speech commands us. No procession asks our attention. What remains is habitation. People behind shutters, lamps behind walls, footsteps fading, the watch moving on, the fountain still running. The lamp in the upstairs room is pinched lower. The flame leans, recovers, and dims. Tomorrow will bring water again, bread again, work again, bargaining, bathing, meals, errands, prayers, repairs, voices, and the endless small labour of staying alive in a city too large for any one person to understand. For now, the room settles, the street below softens, Rome, old and unfinished, begins to sleep. Night makes distances uncertain. A nearby voice can sound far away, and a distant cart can seem just outside the door. Flame exaggerates movement. Shadows lengthen fingers, jars, stools, and hanging cloth. The same room that felt cramped by day may feel protective by lamp, its limits softened by darkness. On the roof, the air carries fragments. A tavern song loses its words and becomes melody. A fountain loses its location and becomes water. A watchman's step loses its person and becomes rhythm. The city is still full of information, but sleep edits it. It keeps only what can drift. Somewhere, a person looks at the stars and does not think of astronomy. They think of weather, gods, sailors, omens, or simply beauty. The ancient sky above Rome was not empty decoration. It was calendar, story, navigation, speculation, and comfort. Yet for a tired worker, it may have been only a cool brightness after a long day, which is enough. Dreams in ancient Rome were not always dismissed as meaningless. Many people, across the ancient Mediterranean, considered dreams capable of carrying messages, warnings, or impressions from the divine, the dead, or the hidden workings of the body and mind. Not every dream was solemn, of course. Some were nonsense, some forgotten at once. But the sleeping city was also a city of dreamers, interpreting or ignoring the images that came in darkness. A person lying near a lamp's last glow may think of tomorrow's route, fountain, bakery, workshop, market, baths if there is time. The mind walks ahead while the body lies still. Anxiety does this, but so does habit. Planning becomes a bridge into sleep. Outside, the fountain still runs. It is one of the most soothing thoughts in the city, that while people rest, water continues. It passes through channels, enters basins, overflows, reflects flame, cools stone, waits for jars. The day ends, but the systems that hold life together do not entirely sleep. Doors at night have a different meaning. During the day, a doorway connects home to street. At night, it protects the thin line between known and unknown. Bars, locks, watchful ears, and household routines create security as best they can. A person checking a door before sleep participates in a gesture as old as settled life. Once the door is secured, the room becomes a small island. Outside remains Rome, vast, restless, layered, and never entirely quiet. Inside is breath, bedding, the smell of lamp smoke, and the day's fatigue finally claiming the body. As sleep approaches, the body edits the city. Loud sounds become distant. Sharp worries become blurred at the edges. The mind may drift back to the fountain, the bath, a sentence from the market, the smell of bread, the face of someone seen only briefly. The day rearranges itself into fragments, and fragments become dreams. And so we come to the end of one ordinary day in ancient Rome. Not the whole of Rome, because no single day could hold it. Not the true life of every person, because the city was too varied, too unequal, too layered, and too alive for one story to contain. But perhaps we have walked close enough to hear something quieter than empire. We began before dawn, when the city was only shapes and sounds. A cart in the dark, a fountain running, a shutter opening, a stairwell holding the warmth of sleeping rooms. We climbed into an insula and saw how many lives could be stacked above a single street. We followed water from public fountain to household jar. We smelled bread from the bakery and watched the first meal of the day form from simple things. We listened to shops opening, tools waking, trades beginning, and the ordinary skill of hands. We crossed the Forum not as a silent ruin, but as a crowded public place where people waited, argued, traded, greeted patrons, read notices, and worried about matters small and large. We paused near a schoolroom, where letters scratched into wax taught children to make marks that could travel beyond the voice. We entered households of different kinds, remembering that family, labour, status, devotion, and survival all lived under the same roof. We moved through markets and supply chains, following grain and oil and wine from distant fields and seas into Roman streets. We rested at midday in shade, near water and small shrines. We entered the baths, where steam softened the body and conversation echoed under stone. We returned to evening meals, lamps, household gods, rooftops, and the watchful streets of night. The emperors are not absent from this world. Their power-shaped laws, buildings, distributions, armies, taxes, and public ceremonies. Their names appeared on coins, inscriptions, and monuments. But most people did not live their days as chapters in imperial biography. They lived in errands, meals, debts, trades, friendships, aches, rituals, jokes, smells, and small acts of endurance. They lived by knowing where to find water, whom to trust at the market, how to mend a garment, when to leave for work, how to stretch food, how to greet a patron, how to calm a child, how to close a door at night. History often remembers those who had the power to command stone, but archaeology, inscriptions, and patient imagination allow us to hear others. The baker, the fuller, the potter, the child with a wax tablet, the woman weighing herbs, the porter with tired shoulders, the bath attendant, the scribe, the neighbour at the fountain, the unnamed person who lit a lamp in an upstairs room and watched the city fade. There is something peaceful in this, not because their lives were easy, but because they were real. The ancient city was not only a drama of rise and fall, it was also repetition, morning after morning, bread after bread, jar after jar, step after step. A day could pass without becoming famous and still matter completely to the person who lived it. Now the lamps are low, the fountain continues in the darkness, the shops are closed, the tools rest. The Forum stands quiet beneath the stars, emptied of the day's arguments. In the apartment rooms, people sleep close to their possessions, their families, their worries, and their dreams. In the wealthy houses, servants finish the last tasks. In the streets, the watch keeps moving. Far away, ships wait for weather. Grain rests in warehouses. Ovens hold tomorrow's heat in memory. Rome is not gone. Not while we can still imagine the sound of water and sandals on stone. But it is distant enough to become gentle. Let it recede now. Let the walls soften. Let the rooftops darken. Let the names carved in marble grow quiet, and let the unnamed city breathe. If there is a lesson in the quiet day, it is not that ancient Rome was simple. It is that ordinary life is always complicated in ways that grand history can miss. A loaf of bread contains agriculture, trade, labour, fuel, hunger, price, and taste. A fountain contains engineering, public policy, neighbourhood gossip, and the ache of carrying weight upstairs. A lamp contains oil, pottery, flame, cost, and the human wish to keep darkness at a manageable distance. The unnamed people of Rome did not know they were background. No one is background to themselves. Each person moved through the city from the centre of their own concerns. The empire may have been vast, but life arrived one task at a time. Wake, dress, fetch, buy, work, wait, eat, bathe, pray, speak, sleep, begin again. And perhaps that is why this old city can be restful to imagine. Not because it was peaceful in every way, but because beneath the noise of power, it shared the steady rhythms that human beings have always known. Water, food, shelter, labour, companionship, fatigue, memory, and the hope that tomorrow will be manageable when it comes. The story of ordinary Rome is not smaller than the story of emperors. It is simply closer to the ground. It asks us to notice things power rarely notices. The hand around a jar handle, the child tracing letters, the shopkeeper lifting a shutter, the tired bather stepping into evening air, the lamp lowered beside a bed. These are small images, but they are not minor. They are the human scale of history. Wherever you are listening from, whatever hour it is where you are, may the rest of your night be calm. May your own room feel steady around you. May your thoughts loosen like a city after sunset. And may sleep come softly, step by step, like dawn in reverse. Good night.
Thank you for watching Something About Sleep. Since you're clearly still awake, why don't you click on the next video and we'll see you there.